Hello, everyone. Welcome. Today, I'm here with Diego, friend
Hiya.
that I've met on the what's the name of this Discord channel?
Uh, Let me look again.
Ipsum.
Ipsum audite. That's it.
I think it means follow him. It's a
I'm here for that.
it's a Discord channel with different Catholic content creators and friends. And he and I were talking the other day. We happened to realize that we both have ADHD and OCD. And those are two things which have incredible effects on just your spirituality and life as a Catholic. And we just realized we were so similar. We thought that maybe it'd be fruitful to have a discussion about it. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that before we get into it.
Well, no, it's not every day that you run into someone who has a very similar, initial return or conversion to the faith, where the difficulties are almost identical. So this is definitely something that people can probably get something from.
Yeah, it's actually really unique. Yeah, if you don't mind saying whatever you want to about your, I believe it was a reversion that you had.
Yeah. So I reverted about how much? Has it been 2 years almost? Almost 2 years now. A year and a half, more or less. Um, After a long time of basically my whole life of essentially being either just like a Catholic in name only. Um, the more closer I got to the day that I reverted, actually, the more willing I was to say I was a Catholic. But like my life and that proclamation were basically not even not even close to the same ballpark. But eventually, I just had a moment where I kind of just I had an opportunity to go to confession for the first time in like 6 or 7 years, because I hadn't been since I was confirmed.
Yeah.
And so I went, and I didn't know how confession worked, despite it had been despite the fact that I had gone before. Like, I didn't remember how it worked. So I said whatever I could, or I tried to say, because there was some pretty egregious stuff in there that I didn't want, I was embarrassed, or I was afraid to say, but I tried.
Yeah. No,
And then I actually walked out before the priest said the absolution.
that's crazy.
I didn't know, right? I didn't know, so I left.
Yeah.
And then like later that week, I went again, and that time I did it the real way, right? Like, I got it all
Okay.
out, or not all of it. I went back a couple more times, but that's a whole other ball game. But I went again to a different, when I was back in town, because I was out of town when I went the first time. The second time I go to the church that I had been going to for the time at the time. And I made my confession, and it's been well, frankly, I wish I could say it was been smooth sailing ever since, but at least I'm hopefully moving in the right direction.
Yeah, no, I'm sure you are. Yeah, I had a pretty similar thing. I well, mine wasn't a reversion; it was a conversion, because I was sort of an atheistic agnostic, which is something I don't think I've discussed on this channel before.
Oh,
Perhaps
okay.
I'll go in depth on that in the future. But I converted to Catholicism, and it was interesting because I started off uh not really claiming to any particular denomination. I was
Hmm.
just like, okay, I think religion is cool, gives you good morality, and it seems to be scientifically plausible. So,
Right.
because that was my main thing, is I realized, okay, science doesn't necessarily contradict religion. And so because of that, I was like, okay, I'll be a Christian. And it was a little later, or no, it was that same day. I was like, okay, I'll be a Catholic, because they seem like they're the most involved. Because that was my thing. I wanted to give it my all, give it my whole
Right.
heart and follow everything. So I was like, Catholics seem like they do that. So that's what I'm gonna follow in that way. And
Okay.
then
That's
it
interesting.
wasn't, yeah, I mean, the OCD didn't really come in at this point. Yes, I started to be more conscious of my sin, but I wasn't really tripping about it yet.
Yeah. No. Oh, I
For a while.
should mention, for me, it started literally right out the box. Um so the priest gave me a penance of saying, I don't know how many, I think I said it was like 5 Our Fathers or something like that.
Yeah.
But I was so like paranoid to get it right that I looked it up and I made sure I said like not just the Our Father, but also the "For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours now and forever." Like I said that, and I like looked it up and had to make sure I said it right. Like it was, I was in trouble from day one, basically, with this stuff.
Oh yeah, no, and that's the thing, like, because I had always been very OCD, but once I went through my catechesis, I learned a lot, and then it was getting to be just before Easter, and so I needed to do my first confession, and so I did
Right.
that confession, and then right afterwards, like immediately, I start tripping, like because
Oh, I
my
see.
mom, yeah, my mom picked me up, right, and after I was
Wait,
done
so
doing.
were you baptized at all, or?
Yeah, I was baptized.
Okay, okay,
I was baptized. I just hadn't been
confirmed.
hadn't been confirmed. So
Okay.
I needed to do this confession, and then I remember I get out of, I mean, because it was a weird situation because it's at my campus ministry, so it was
Hmm.
just me and my pre, like no box or anything. We were just sitting there with each other. Did the confession, and then I left. My mom picked me up, and we were driving for like maybe about a minute, and she said something that made me mad, and then I was like, oh no, I think I've committed a mortal sin.
Oh,
And then bro, it just started from there. It
it's all
was
downhill.
yeah, all downhill from there. I mean, just like for the rest of that day and for the rest of all the days to come, it was just me tripping constantly over um, any little intrusive thoughts
Right.
or
Yeah. Yeah.
anger or
Yeah.
a bit of anger that came into my head. I had to
Yeah.
sit there and mull over it to consider whether it was a mortal sin or not.
Right.
Yeah, and my
Yeah. That's
yeah, and like
that's rough.
my catechesis, it wasn't like I hadn't been catechized well enough to be able to distinguish very well between mortal and venial sin
Right.
because I
Right.
feel like in normal teaching, they don't really explain it in depth enough for somebody with scrupulosity to be able
Hmm.
to distinguish well. I don't know what
To
your
be fair,
experience.
our when scrupulosity is, actually, I don't know how true this is. I want to believe that it's not as common as like it might, like as it's not that common, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's gotten more common in the last like, I don't know, 10 years or whatever, right?
Really?
With That's my guess. Like I would not be surprised. I really do not know, but it seems to me that it's something that everyone in one way or another struggles with, but
Yeah.
to what degree, whether it's like over a particular sin, like literally just one sin, or like, you
Mm,
know,
okay.
you and me, where it's like a lifetime battle,
Yeah.
really, right? And I forget where I was going with this, actually.
No problem.
But yeah, no, it's for me. Oh, right. For me with catechesis, I the thing is like I was like the worst student ever for most of my life.
Yeah, I get
So
that.
like I wish I could tell you they never taught me, but it's very possible they did, and I just wasn't paying attention.
Mhm.
Right. And that's basically been the gist of my education. Was they could have taught me that, but I wasn't paying attention. Right.
Yeah.
I was a pretty just either distracted or just not caring, or I'm just trying to get this over with, or like something like that, where I'm just trying to get through it. I'm not actually really learning anything.
Mhm. Yeah, and I get that. But yeah, I just feel like it's hard to be prepared for what you sort of go through as like a Catholic with OCD, like bad OCD.
Mm,
Like once the scrupulosity kicks in because it's like it's inherently irrational. And so you just need, it takes a lot to be able to overcome that. I mean, because the types of things that you might commonly struggle with, when you have your scrupulosity as a Catholic with OCD. Um, it might be something like you look at somebody and then your mind starts attacking you with these thoughts of like oh, you notice their breasts maybe, or
yeah.
you notice this person's fat and you're like, oh yeah, this guy's fat, and then like because the thing with OCD,
or are you being judgmental? What's the matter with you? Like that kind of stuff.
yeah, no, it's like you're being judgmental. I mean, and it's not even the thing that is important to recognize is that it's not you. It's because with OCD, it's compulsive. It's your mind. Your mind will attack you with things that you're scared of, and regarding matters that you care deeply about. And like the faith is the most important thing. And so when you're trying not to commit sin, you don't want to be in a state of mortal sin that matters most to you. That means that your OCD, that's going to be target number one for your OCD. It's going to attack you in that. It's going to make you like, it's going to try to manifest your fears. So you look at somebody and all of a sudden you think that you've lusted over them and you've committed a mortal sin because your mind just starts attacking you with those thoughts.
Or you just like, or even just, it's as simple as like, you did that on purpose, right? Like the thought is simply, actually, I should say this. For me, it was, I did that on purpose. And so in my mind, if I did something on purpose, I committed a mortal sin, right? Specifically when it came to things like, things with like the 10 Commandments or like more serious matter, right? If I did something on purpose, like had an impure thought, or rather I should say, if I had a thought or I looked at somebody or whatever, and the scruple was, did I think that on purpose or did I look there on purpose, right? Or did I say that on purpose, or like essentially it was the like, because what is it, for a mortal sin to happen, it's grave matter, full consent and
full knowledge and deliberate
full knowledge and and so it was that deliberate consent thing that always stressed me out, because I was never sure if I did that right, if I had full consent. And so I was like, well, what counts? Like, like, well, let me think back on it here. Like, did I actually, oh no, but I'm thinking about it now, what am I doing? Like,
oh yeah,
you can't win.
Yeah, no, I've had that. I think that was probably the main problem for me. I mean, it has been, still is the main problem for me too, is like you look at somebody and then, or whatever thing that you think is a sin happens, and it's like, then you realize it and it's like, okay, did I just give that deliberate consent? Did I choose to have that thought? And then that, like, once you ask that question, you're cooked, because it's like you're gonna start you're gonna start like mulling over it and thinking of it, replaying the situation in your mind over and over and over again to try to figure out like at what point you gave consent or you didn't give consent, and then like you said, you're gonna get into it, like once you're replaying the sinful thought in your head over and over again, then it's like, okay, now I'm committing that sin, and then now I need to, or like it starts attacking you again, and you're thinking, oh, did I just recommit this sin? And trying to assess whether I committed it in the first place. Now I need to discern that. But like, it really just, it's just a perpetrating cycle. You assessing whether you've committed a sin or not, it causes you to just go through it over and over again. And the more that you feed into it, the more that you're not going to be able to decide, and the more that this is going to happen to you in the future. I don't know what your experience has been with that.
No, it's been more or less like that. It's the lack of clarity is what fuels the fear, right? Like, oh, I don't know if this is a sin or not, right? But that then causes you to basically just torment, like just keep replaying and keep trying to figure it out over and over and over again, right? In your head, and all it does is just form this habit of like, anytime something isn't like crystal clear, like bright as day, you just never know, and then that bleeds into your venial sins. I shouldn't say it like that, but like that bleeds into venial sin, where like now you start thinking like, by how you it starts bleeding into venial sin, where you're like, was that actually a mortal sin? And it never ends, right? The torment never ends with when you start indulging those trains of thought.
Yeah. If you let if you let it happen, you're gonna like, it's gonna get to the point where every venial sin that you commit, and oftentimes for me at least, looking back, I can see a lot of cases where I wasn't even sinning at all. It was just
Yeah.
a thought came into my head, not even a thought that I gave consent to or anything. It's just, thoughts happen. Not every thought that comes into your head is something that you're like seriously entertaining, such that God is gonna like condemn you for that.
Or even a sin, period. Like, it might have been completely like just unconscious, like it just came in there and you're like, oh, that's ridiculous, get out of there, right? But
Yeah,
when you're
which would
struggling
be
through these,
something that you didn't have full knowledge of because you didn't
yeah,
realize it
exactly.
yet.
But like when you're struggling with scrupulosity, it's just the mere fact that you had it that is the
Yes.
cause of concern, right?
Yes. I mean, regardless, it's bad because one, you're gonna think that, so you have grave matter, deliberate consent, and full knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
You're always gonna assume that you have full knowledge, even though you may have not realized it initially. Once you have realized it, you think that you knew it from the beginning.
Right.
And for deliberate consent, you start mulling over whether you had deliberate consent or not, and you can't figure it out because it's like something that happened within like, I don't know, an instant, like 0.2 seconds. So it's like,
Right.
how could you, you know, uh, the and I'll give a spoiler for later. The assumption here should be that you didn't give a deliberate consent. Once you realize, if you say no, then you didn't give a deliberate consent. But like, you'll think that you always give a deliberate consent, and then you'll think that things aren't grave matters are always grave matters. So you're always thinking that you're committing mortal sin, and then this causes you to feel like you have to go to confession all the time. Like for me, it was like I would go to confession every day, every other day,
Same here.
maybe.
Same. I was going every day at one point.
Yeah, like it was for a while. It was every day going to confession, and like the thing is that most priests are they're just gonna like hear your confession. They're not gonna like refuse your confession. So
Yeah,
it's not.
there's one priest in my diocese who, like, I don't know if it was just for me or what, but like he wouldn't even give me like advice. He'd just say that, all right, so as a penance here, like he just jumped straight to the penance.
Yeah,
So in a way, it was like strangely convenient to go to him when
yeah,
those scruples were at its worst, because I just go to him, get the, and then there
yeah.
we go.
You get that
all done.
satisfaction.
Right.
It's like, oh, yeah,
Well, and confession just becomes a way to soothe the conscience rather than to
Yeah.
actually, like, receive God's mercy.
Oh
Which
yeah,
obviously that's a part of it, but when you're in this mindset, really what you're trying to do is just get the anxiety to go away, right? And the only way you can be is like, okay, well, confession for sure gets it out of there, right?
yeah. No, I mean, and that's the thing with like OCD. It's you have some obsession, and then you have like tics.
Yeah.
Things that you have to do in order to resolve it. Like I always had that. I've always had that. Like I can think as far back to like second grade, right? I can remember I did this thing where I guess I had thoughts that I didn't like, and so then I would put my hands together like I'm praying or something, and then that was my tic, and I specifically recall like my teacher like, "Are you praying? Like, what are you doing?" And so then I had to like adjust my tic to make it look less like, I don't know,
So it was more
noticeable.
discreet. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've always had that, like in high school, and even now, still, part
I've
of
had
one of my
no.
tics is
Go on.
like
Go on. Go on.
my head will like kind of twitch or something, like shaking off a thought. That stuff has always been there, and it's like
Yeah, me too.
once
I
you
do
allow,
that too. I
yeah,
shake my head, or I'll like squint my eyes for a second, or I'll
uh-huh,
like the one that I do that I got called for recently was, I'll kind of like, if I see something that's just kind of cringe, or something that's raunchy or whatever, right? I just kind of shut my eyes and take a deep breath, right?
yeah,
And then but someone asked me like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." Like I just tried to play
yeah,
it off. I'm like, "Please don't
yeah.
make me explain this. Like, I'm not going to explain this to you. I can't."
Yeah, no, and the thing is that they're probably not going to understand. It's
No,
like
they wouldn't.
OCD is something that's, and that's a part of why it's so difficult. Is like OCD is something that's so hard to understand, and people like, especially with this like stereotype of, oh, I'm so OCD, I need to clean my room or whatever. No, you're not
Right.
OCD. OCD is an actual like mental problem. Like this is like a serious issue. It's not, it's not something small, and so it's like people who have OCD they're going through all this and nobody else can really understand it, maybe except for like a trained therapist. Very few
Yeah.
clergy would be trained to be able to like detect that as well. And
Well,
so,
and
yeah,
the thing is, right? It might not even necessarily be like, what is it like? Because the thing is like, if I recall correctly, scrupulosity is like a legitimate. It's a form of OCD specifically. Like it's a religious
yes,
OCD, right?
yeah,
Uh, and whether you're diagnosed or not for that that doesn't change the validity of the struggle, right?
yeah,
Like because like a priest can tell you you're being scrupulous, right?
mhm,
And if like it doesn't, frankly, it's funny. It doesn't take much for someone to recognize that, at least in my opinion, it shouldn't take a priest too long. Like if they hear like 3 of your confessions in a row, they'll probably be like, "Okay, hold on, yo, chill. Like, listen."
yeah,
Especially if they're like in successive days, or like even in the same day, the priest might be able to get a pretty good idea of what the problem here is.
yeah,
But
yeah. But the problem is that a lot of priests just aren't equipped to deal with it, though.
no, they're not, and it's not even. It's not. I would say it's not like. I want to say through no fault of their own, in a
Yeah,
sense, because like it's just such a. It's such a. The level of detail and like questions you have to be prepared to answer as a priest from a scrupulant is like just unreasonable sometimes.
oh yeah,
Like
no, it's
I've
atrocious.
seen like. I remember one time when I was like really scrupulous and like I'd go on like various websites. Like I remember I went on like the Reddit, like the Catholic Reddit, just to see what people said about one thing or another. And like I saw a thread where like a priest answered the question, and then the guy asked, "Hi, sorry," like, and then asked some clarifying questions. The priest answered, and like there was just nonstop. The guy kept saying like, "Hi, sorry," another question. "Hi, sorry," another question. Like that's how he would say it, and
Yeah,
he'd
no,
keep
that's the thing.
doing this. Like I don't know how many there were, but like the priest stopped answering, right? Because he's like,
Oh my goodness,
he
God bless
probably
his
was
soul.
just, well, he was probably just like, I can't do this, right? Or he,
No, and that's the thing is like I did that for a long time, and I think it was helpful to an extent of allowing me to gain like a certain um knowledge, I guess, of having a better intuition of distinguishing between what is generally a grave matter and what's not a grave matter. But like, you don't want to keep asking your priest questions like, "Oh,
well,
was this? What do you think this was a grave sin?"
yeah,
Because
exactly.
if you keep asking them, then like that then becomes your tick. You have to ask them. You need to get that satisfaction, just
Uh
as
huh.
you need to get that satisfaction of relieving the anxiety of your
Well, and
OCD.
that can help depending on your circumstance. Like, I think it's Saint. Who's it? Which saint is it? I'm forgetting his name. The one who died in Auschwitz. What's his name?
Oh,
Why am I forgetting his
Maximilian
name?
Kolbe.
Yeah, Colby. So he had scrupulosity, and
Oh,
when he joined his religious order, right? I think he was a Franciscan, I believe. But when he joined, his superior assigned a monk or a priest, whatever, to follow him, and he was told, anytime you have a scruple, you talk to him, and whatever he says goes, right?
yeah,
And,
yeah,
and so
and
like. And I was thinking to myself, like, man, I wish I had that. Like, that'd be great, just to have a
yeah.
priest
No, I
literally
mean,
like right there to ask, and then just get the answer, and then
it
hopefully have some peace.
yeah, I mean, it would be, but I think a part of the problem is like, yes, it's good to ask questions sometimes because if you generally just aren't catechized well enough to distinguish between these things, then it's like, yeah, ask a question. But I think a lot of times what it's
It
going to
can
be
become a
is that
crutch.
it just becomes a crutch. So you always ask these questions. They don't ask stupid questions. I mean, I asked a priest once, like and this is probably one of the most stupid things I ever asked. It was like I'd seen this Muslim girl, right? She had hijab, and I think I when I laid eyes on her, I saw the hijab, and I'm like, oh, she's a Muslim, and
Right.
then I like, oh no, I've committed a mortal sin because I've assumed about her. I've
What?
assumed that she's a Muslim, dude. Yeah, no, that was like
I
he,
shouldn't laugh, but that's like that is something else. Like I wonder what your priest thought in that moment.
dude, he
Like
was like, he's a Jesuit too, right? He's like, I'm pretty sure that's like I think that's a good
That's a good
analysis.
assumption to
She's
make.
that's a good assumption to make. She's running a job, so she's a Muslim.
Well,
But
like
it's like,
even just the fact that you like, I guess like even just the thought of like if like let's say I like saw like some lady walk by and for like whatever reason like I thought I think she might be like a Baptist or something like that. Let's just say, right?
uh-huh.
Like for me, like if that happened to me, I would have just gone like, oh, I think she might be a Baptist, and that's basically the end of it, right? But
Mhm.
like I've never had that. That's an interesting one.
Yeah, no, that was what I had for a while because I started being more aware of like judging people by like appearance,
Right,
and so
right.
then I became scrupulous about it. And I was like, I would see somebody and like assume about them, like, oh, this
Well,
person gives
I've done
non-denom
like
vibes,
I've
and then I
done
think
where
I'm
like
sinning.
I'll look at somebody and like I'll think they're a threat just because of their appearance, right?
Yeah,
Like I've done that one, and like that one I went and my priest was just like, no, you're just chill.
yeah,
Like it's
no, dude,
like
like chill.
it's something to improve on, but like chill.
Yeah, no, it's like really not that big of a deal. It's like
That
it's
is heavy
reality. It's like
paraphrasing from my priest. That is not the exact advice he gave me. He said it very differently, but I think I can boil down a lot of his things. Like you just have ADHD. Just chill.
yeah, no, yeah, just chill, just chill. Yeah, and like that's the thing, like you don't want to get into crutches too much because what's gonna happen is you're gonna ask stupid questions. You're gonna ask your priest whether you like seeing somebody with a hijab was a sin, and it's like,
Right.
and they're gonna give you an answer, and it's not gonna be satisfying
Well,
enough
yeah,
for
like
you.
I got even to a point where like I thought just straight up just looking at a woman, like, and I mean like literally just, I don't mean like staring, like being like a creep. I mean literally just seeing a woman, registering there is a woman in my line of sight as a problem. Like I thought that was bad, right? And that was just because of how it spiraled. Because I was like, no, I don't want to look at them because I don't want to. I don't trust how my eyes work. And like I'd see a woman's face and I'd be like, oh, right.
Yeah, no, that's actually
Or
I'm
just like, or
struggling with
even,
that now. I'm
or
still
even just
dealing with that.
even just the acknowledgement that like that lady's pretty, like the face, right? Like, oh, she's pretty, right? That
Yeah,
would like drive me crazy, right? I
yeah,
would be
because
like, no, 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 no.
your brain starts attacking you.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, but like with these things, ultimately, it's like, okay, you probably don't want to rely on a crutch. You don't want to
hmm,
like have always have something to fall back on that'll like give you like certainty. Do you know you don't need certainty? You don't need certainty, right? What you need is to rely on God's mercy and like and that sounds like super like okay
well,
silly advice.
even what you're saying there, like the one thing is that like it, the mere fact that you're asking, did I have certainty, means you didn't have certainty, which means you
Yeah,
can very safely say, okay, I that's venial, right? Like
yeah.
let's assume what you did was like actually a sin of some kind, right? The mere fact that you're asking, wait, did I have clarity? Did I do that on purpose? Like
It
you
means
would know.
you probably did. You didn't. You would know.
Yeah,
You would know.
and
Like
that's
that's the
yes.
thing. Like first of all, you need to realize that God is merciful.
Hmm.
If He's not gonna like, he's not gonna, he's not a gotcha God. He's not gonna like, oh, you're going to hell now because you like you had a thought that came into your head for a millisecond, and
Right.
then you don't know whether you entertained that thought or whatever.
Well, yeah,
You
he's
need
not
to
lying in the bushes waiting to like condemn us the moment we like
no,
drop the
no, he's
ball.
not.
Like, no, I shouldn't
He's
say
not.
drop the ball. Like the moment we even look like we're dropping the ball.
Yeah, no, like you need to understand that God is merciful and ask him for guidance. Pray. Ask for like I rely on you, God. I give this to you wholeheartedly. I want to follow your will. I want to be in a state of grace. I want to give this to you. And so you give it to God and you allow him you try to be more at peace with that. And then
Well,
there's like certain heuristics that you can then
absolutely.
start applying, like, and for those who don't know what that is, heuristics is like a rule of thumb. And so like a good rule of thumb for people who aren't scrupulous is if you're uncertain as to whether you committed a mortal sin, go to confession anyway. But it's the
Mhm.
opposite for
Yeah,
people
it's
who
the
have
opposite
scrupulosity.
for Yeah,
Yeah,
no, it's very interesting. A lot of the advice, well, not advice, but like a lot of the, I guess, rules of engagement, for lack of a better term, for the unscrupulous should not be heeded for the scrupulous, because
absolutely not.
you don't have the clarity to even make the choice of like, was that a man? Like, let's say you need confession every 2 weeks, right? Let's say that's your normal pattern. It's not because you sin every 2 weeks mortally. It's just because that's what you like to do, right?
Yeah.
That's your preferred schedule, or I guess frequency of confession. But you do something like, I don't know, maybe you get a little too angry, or whatever, right? Whatever it may be, and you're like, oh, was that a mortal sin? I'll just go to confession tomorrow just to get that cleaned up, right? You can't do
Mhm.
that as a scrupulant. You
No,
you
you can't.
Because like if you apply that kind of like way of doing things, you'll be in there every day.
Yeah, no, like the rule of thumb for a scrupulous person is if you're not certain that you committed a mortal sin, don't go to confession.
Hmm.
Don't. Just don't. Unless it's like, oh, once you get it down better and it's like, every 2 weeks, every month or whatever, you feel like, okay, maybe I should, it's time to go to confession, even though I don't think I've committed a mortal sin. But it's like, you want to, because the thing is that your mind is going to attack you on this idea of
Uh-huh.
the certainty. And it's like, God is, first of all, God is merciful. He's not attacked. He's not waiting in the bushes trying to catch you sinning. And second of all, like what it takes to have full knowledge and deliberate consent, like that bar is higher than you think it is. That
Yeah,
bar is higher than you
it
think
is
it is.
it's high. I was saying, I would say this to a friend. I said this to a friend of mine, like when I was still in my scruples. So it's kind of ironic that I said it, but like it seems very. It's harder than you. How do I say this? I'm not trying to sound like a heretic when I say this, but it's like it's not. It's harder than you think that to commit a mortal sin, because
Yeah.
like there has to be a very deliberate choice that
Mhm.
like is not just as simple as I accidentally did it, or like it's not.
Yeah, there is no accidentally committing a mortal sin. There is no, oh, I slipped, like you slipping into mortal sin. It that
Yeah,
that
yeah,
doesn't happen. Like if you look at a girl, right, and
right,
your OCD starts attacking your mind about it. Maybe you get a little angry, or like a lustful thought comes into your mind, and then immediately with your will you deny it. If
right,
you, like, the second that you recognize that and you're trying to actively deny it, you didn't sin. You did not give that consent. You did
right.
not give that thought consent. Like, unless you're sitting there and like, okay, I know what I'm doing. I know that I'm thinking about this girl, and you sit there and you actually allow yourself to engage in those thoughts, knowing the consequences, knowing what you're doing, that would be a mortal sin. But just having thoughts attack your mind and then you start trying to deny it. Like one thing that I was told once, and this really helped me, was like, as long as you're trying to like deny it, like your will right now
Hmm.
actively is to like get away from this thought, or to
Or at least just
or
resist it, right?
yeah, if you're trying to resist it, then you're not consenting to it. You
Yeah.
know, like the second you realize, oh, something just happened, and you're like resisting it, you want to love God, you're good. You just demonstrated in that moment that you didn't give deliberate consent to it.
Hmm. Well, and you know what? Um, it's funny. Like I, it, you would think with something like the internet, it'd be so easy for a scrupulant to get their answers of like whether X or Y is a sin. Because I wanna mention this, because I found that the place that made my scruples worse was going online to get answers. Frankly,
Yeah.
for not for like advice for scrupulants. I mean, just like, was this a sin or not, right? Or like that sort of thing. Going for advice on the internet is the worst thing you can do, because you're going to have people who either don't know what they're talking about, or again, the advice is for the, I guess, the general public, so to speak, right? It's not for people who like have a scrupulous conscience, and so they'll say things in ways that can actually make it worse. I remember I read one guy, he was like, if you even for like a second consented, yeah, you've committed a mortal sin. And like
Oh my
obviously it's true
goodness.
if you consent, right? But like you got to understand that like when you say it like that, it sounds like, oh, if like but what if I did for like a microsecond, like, and it's like all that does is just make it worse, right?
Yeah.
That
No,
because
you're gonna
all that,
find.
it just gives more fuel to the fire. And some priests even like
Yeah, I've
they
seen that too.
they don't know how to communicate. Like some priests will talk about scrupulosity, and they don't help, right?
Yeah.
They don't help. They just kind of make it more frustrating. Um, it's and maybe that was me for my temperament, my just how I am, the way they talk, the way they explain stuff wasn't for me. But like with regards to like when they talk about like, or wasn't me for me in regards to how they would talk about scrupulosity, maybe one person heard that video and was like, oh great, perfect, awesome, it's cured
Mhm.
now, right?
Yeah.
But for me at least, it was like, this is, while certainly helpful, it's not useful in any way.
Yeah.
Or not
No,
in
I
any
mean
way,
that's
but it's not
true.
useful to what I would need, right?
Yeah, and like getting over like scrupulosity is like a serious endeavor that requires consistent effort. And
Mhm.
especially if you have like OCD, you're going to be dealing with that for the rest of your life. And
Well,
that's okay.
and frankly, what it requires is you need to have a spiritual director of some kind, like a priest,
Yeah.
or even just a trusted, good, faithful friend that you can, like. I would recommend a priest, frankly. Get a
Yeah.
priest, get a spiritual director, because you cut through the noise of like social media or like just online theologian experts in like 300 air quotes, right? Because at that point, when you submit yourself to a spiritual director, you literally get the answer you work with,
Mhm.
and you accept it, right? Like if the priest says, I know that we just said like you don't want to do the whole is this a sin or not thing, right? But like if that's what you're at, if that's where you're at right now, and the priest says yes or no, that's it, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
can
let it
drop it
be.
now. It's on.
Yeah, drop it.
It's funny enough, it's on the priest now, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's something that I actually, funny enough, that's something I found very, it helped, was once, like in confession or in spirit, at least in the context of confession, though I'd imagine spiritual direction is very similar. When the priest tells you like that was not a sin, now it's on him, right? Assuming
Yeah.
it's not something that's flagrantly obvious, like I don't know, masturbation or something like that. Assuming it's not something flagrantly obvious like that, and the priest says that's not a sin or that's a venial sin, done, right? I used to think saying like, oh my god, was like a cataclysmic mortal sin, right? And my
Yeah.
priest told me that's venial, okay?
Yeah.
Right?
And don't.
Obviously don't say it, like try to avoid saying it, but that's venial, right? And so I'm like, okay, you say it's
Yeah, and don't
venial,
give
it's
into the
venial.
temptations to be like, "Oh no, but you're not understanding." Like,
Yes,
don't
yes,
do that.
yes. Don't do the whole like, no, 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 like don't circumstance the priest, right? If
No.
he needs questions, or sorry, if he needs more clarification, he will ask you, right?
Yeah.
That's one thing like I've heard like a couple times, is like if the priest has questions, he will ask. If he needs to clarify, he will ask, right? If
Yeah.
you're not being clear, he'll ask for clarification, and if he doesn't, he got the gist of it,
Yeah.
right?
No,
Like,
yeah, and that's true. And you also gotta make sure that like the spiritual because some spiritual directors just aren't good for certain people. Like
right.
you gotta
You need
make
a
sure
you
that
need one for you. Yeah.
yeah, you need one for you. You need somebody that can handle OCD, that knows how to deal with it. Cause like
Hmm.
what's interesting is like I had my spiritual director and he was like, okay, I can be your spiritual director, but like OCD is something that's like beyond me. Like you need a therapist for this.
Right.
And so I had my spiritual director and then I had my therapist who was trained specifically to handle stuff like OCD.
Well, and that's perfectly valid, right? Like the priest like A, the priest understands what he's capable of helping you with, right? And
Yeah.
B, there's nothing wrong with turning to an expert in that stuff, like a therapist, because some cat I've heard this from like some people, like that you shouldn't trust therapists, and obviously there's some that like you want to avoid, right? Like there's the therapist out there who will tell you, well, just stop being religious if it's causing you all these
Oh my
problems, right?
goodness.
And
Yeah, right.
those are the ones you absolutely want to just fire right away, right? But like there isn't nothing in principle wrong with going to an expert like a therapist alongside the spiritual director and trying to, like, walk with those two, and one helps you with one set of needs and another helps you with another set of needs, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's precisely what I did. And like over the course of like 3 months, I went from like being dysfunctional, like act
Yeah.
like almost just not being able to function as a person, to like being well on my way to like recovery
Hmm.
from scrupulosity. Like there is no shame in going to somebody that can help you, because frankly, OCD is not something that, like, if you actually want to like start recovering from it and start getting it under control, I don't really think that that's something you can do alone. I really
No,
don't
you,
think it
you
is.
can't. For me, a lot of the OCD is more in slight. The OCD for me manifests purely in the scrupulosity, right? I'm
Mhm.
not like, I don't know, I'm not like one of those people who like has to vacuum every corner of his room. Like if you see my room, it's a mess, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
not that kind of OCD. I'm
No,
the
yeah,
kind of
same.
I'm OCD in as much as it pertains to my scrupulosity. And so I'll give an example. I used to I told to you this before. I became very obsessed with keeping my hands clean when I would touch my rosary or my Bible or anything else, right? So like if I scratched my nose or picked my teeth or just, I don't know, some saliva got on my hand or whatever, right? I had to wash my hands like thorough, like I'd wash them, and like then I'd go touch, and then like if I accidentally like unconsciously scratch my nose, oh, gotta go wash my hands again because I don't want to defile these objects, right?
Yeah.
And that became a pretty heavy like scruple, right? And it only went away when I asked my priest, like, is it okay? Like I finally brought it to my priest some time ago, and I was like, I explained the whole situation. He's like, I don't think the Virgin Mary is gonna get upset if you get a little bit of saliva on the rosary.
Yeah.
Right, like
Yeah.
or something like that. But like the gist was is like it's okay, right? Like you do not need to wash your hands every time,
Yeah, and that's the thing,
right?
like, stuff like that will sneak up on you.
Well,
Like,
and then
if you let it start.
they become all consuming, right?
Yeah.
And it becomes like you can't do anything
Yeah.
until you wash your hands or something like that, as an example, right? It becomes paralyzing, truly. And so at that point, like that's why you need at least a priest that knows you well, right? But to
Mhm.
get that, you have to like to get that, you have to find a priest and like you try to build something with them, right? Like start with the local parish priest. That's who my spiritual director is.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
like my
Same.
local parish is like 2 minutes down the road, like, well, not 2 minutes, it's like a 5 minute drive. you know he's nearby, and like I've gone to him enough times. He understands me, he knows me well enough, and so he's the one I feel the most comfortable with, especially when I'm having a moment, like an attack, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term, with
Yeah.
scrupulosity. Is I go to him because I know he knows how I tick, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, and that's like a wonderful support to have, and I think that everybody that has ROCD should like seek that out. Find
Hmm.
somebody to help them, and like the thing is you really just want to, like, if you feel yourself start being OCD, just like, no, don't, like
Well,
like
you have to make a very, it's very, and that may seem like, because I can see it now. Someone may say, "Oh, that sounds easier than like easier said than done." It can be just as easy as it sounds, because it's for me at least, the scrupulosity comes in the form of like there is a panic or like a stress, right?
mhm,
Or
yeah,
an anxiety, right? Like it's one of those things, and you know every like that is not the fruits of the spirit,
No.
right? None of that comes from God. Anxiety, all these things do not come from God. And so if that is like all you're feeling about those things, when it's unclear and it's not like an egregious, clear-cut, black and white mortal sin type of situation, drop it. Right?
Yeah, let it go.
It's best to drop it, because I shared this with you yesterday. I had a moment where like I thought like it wasn't related to a sin, but it's a similar situation where like I thought like something bad was going to happen in my life, right? And I could feel like just this like anxiety and crushing sadness and like fear and loneliness and depression and all these things coming down on me for a second time, right? Because I had dealt with it when I had first come back into the church. And what stopped it was just a deliberate choice to say, no, I am going to trust what I've been told, and that's it, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to speculate that it's what I think it is. I'm not going to like, oh, what if, right? I'm going to just trust that it's going to be okay.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, like you need to like talk to your spiritual director, talk to your therapist, like figure out like what is best for you. Like I was saying, what's really good for me is like heuristics,
Mhm.
like of okay, in this situation, like if I'm denying it, if I'm actively denying it, I didn't give a deliberate consent. That didn't
Mhm.
happen. You know, like stuff like that. It's like have these rules of thumb, have what they tell you to do in a certain situation, and just trust that. Like whatever.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Seems like you're lagging pretty hard there.
Sorry, I lost my connection there. Oh, good, it saved the recording. Thank God, dude. My laptop died.
It's still recording on my thing here.
Oh, thank God. Since you were still logged in, it kept recording. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Anyway, just trust your intuition, trust God, so that you
Well,
get
you just
so that you allow
there
yourself
is
to have
this.
peace.
You have to come up with strategies, like you were saying, right? Like for you, it's heuristics. For me, it's well, frankly, actually, I don't know what my strategy is, because it kind of depends on what's happening, right? Like
Mm.
sometimes if it's like, let's say I'm having a moment where I think like, oh, maybe I should go to confession there, I allow myself that, right? But it's only when it's like it's not that common, right?
Yeah, no, I had that.
But sometimes, like I had a recent one where it was a certain show that I was watching where I was like, is this okay? Because like it has some raunchy jokes in it, right? And there's some parts where like I have to skip through because they're bad, right? Or just annoying or whatever it is. But I asked my priest, I was like, is that okay? Like, am I doing something wrong, right?
Yeah.
And what he told me is like, that's the wrong question to ask, right? It's what is it doing to you, right? My point is that, well, I should say really, my point with this is like, for me, my strategy is like, before I let it become a scruple, I just simply ask my priest what, like, I simply airing out the laundry of like, this is what I'm dealing with right now is what keeps me sane, right?
Mm.
I think
So you get an answer early on, and then it's like, okay,
yeah. If I get it when it
me.
starts, right? But instead of me trying to figure it out, or instead of me like mulling over the details, I just say, okay, look, here's the situation. Right? Here's what I'm dealing with, right? And I find that I guess you can defer to the wisdom there of Saint Ignatius of Loyola. I think it's the first rule of discernment. Essentially, the enemy is like some coward who would prefer that you don't reveal his plans, right?
Yeah.
The moment you say, hey, that person is like, if someone's like, you know, scheming and like trying to mess with you, and you tell somebody, he'd prefer you don't, right? If you tell, then he runs off. That's what the devil does, right? He's this scheming jerk who like wants you to be alone and not share your problems with anyone. And the moment you go to your priest or whoever, a friend, say, hey, look, this is what I've been struggling with, he hightails it out of there because he knows he's lost.
No, that's true. That's true.
And it's a case where, metaphorically speaking, sunlight is the best disinfectant. You just shine a light on it and pfft, off he goes.
Yeah.
And my point there is like, by going to my priest and really explaining, like, this is what I'm struggling with, how do I navigate this, the problem is solved, right? And if there is a situation where, like, yeah, that's, and if this is a situation like, yeah, you should stop that, like, I trust him to tell me, right?
Yeah. And make sure that you're going to a trusted priest, because like I had the same thing. We both like anime,
Mm-hmm.
and like
we are both mentally disabled.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So like I like I loved anime, right? And then I like somehow or another I get this idea in my head, like, this is sinful.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't watch this. And I think it was because I felt that I was committing idolatry because of how much I loved anime, which is in part because of ADHD, which is something we can get into. Is when you have ADHD, you get hyperfixations, things that you're just like locked into, and that's like taking up a lot of your time. And it can get to like gluttonous levels. Like, even if you're not careful, it could maybe become like idolatrous in some sense. But like, of course, I had a terribly weak conscience at this point. I don't think that I had a good sense of what idolatry really was, and so it's like, okay, I'm committing idolatry and watching these things, but then I had all these like awesome like posters. I had this skateboard that had Ultra Instinct Goku on it, and it was signed by like 20 voice actors that I'd collected over the course of months, and I put like $600 or $700 into this thing, and like I loved it, but it was like, dang, you know, this stuff caused me to commit idolatry. They're idols to me, so like I need to throw them away. And I went to this like priest for confession, and he was like kind of concurred, but I think that was I think I just blew this completely out of proportion. And so I ended up throwing away like over $1,000 worth of just like my, stuff that I had, which in a sense it was nice because it's like it helped me to detach myself from that stuff, but it was also just completely unnecessary.
Right. Yeah, no, I had a very similar situation. I didn't get to the point of throwing all my stuff away, though, because it was just a little too inconvenient for me, right? And I think there was a piece of me that said, like, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a piece of me in retrospect that's like, if I go that far, everyone's gonna think I've actually lost it, like I've gone completely off my rocker. You know, my mom seen me throw away like all my stuff.
Bro, my mom literally, like, she saw me do this and she was like, "Are you okay? Like, are you gonna hurt yourself?"
Well, and that's fair, right? Like,
Yeah, right.
Like, so I never got to that point. But what I did do was I went cold turkey on everything, right? My media diet consisted of basically Mother Angelica and Sensus Fidelium. That was it. I hyperfixated on Mother Angelica, so that, hey, I'll take that.
Yeah, right.
But like, as far as like what I used to do, like I like to play video games, I'd watch anime and other TV shows, right? Cold turkey, basically. I didn't watch nothing, right? Because there would be like, I'd have this extremely high bar or high criteria of what is acceptable. And like, if there was even just a slight tiny drop of a stain on there, the whole thing had to be thrown out, right? It wasn't, like, oh, just skip past that part or avoid that episode. It's like, no. And even if it was the most like mundane thing ever, like one of the actresses wears a shirt in one of the episodes that's a little too low cut, right? Something like that. whole show's garbage, can't watch it, nope, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah,
that
no,
was, so
get
I
that.
guess like it was similar in terms of like how I consumed media, where like everything was garbage now. I had to throw, or well, everything had to be thrown out, right? So to speak.
Yeah, and that's like, that's not
Well, and I
reasonable.
hated every minute of
You
it.
know?
I hated every minute of that because I missed like a lot of that stuff, because like it did bring me like, how do I say this? It brought me entertainment. It like I those are things that I grew up with, right? A bunch of this
Yeah,
stuff,
and that's
and it
okay.
meant something to me, right? And it's actually pretty interesting how easily I was able to decide no, right, in the
Yeah.
moment. And that's probably a lot of that like new revert convert like zeal, and then the scrupulosity on top of it, right? But at a certain point I realized like, man, like this is, I like, I'm bored, right?
Yeah. I mean, and that's okay. You know, it's okay to have like hobbies and to like to do things. Like
Yeah,
like
and like,
you can glorify God through
right.
recreation. Recreation is a good thing that can glorify
I will
God.
say
You just
sports
don't
was
want it to get to like
sports was
gluttonous
basically
levels.
the only thing that I still consumed, because it's kind of like, it's pretty neutral most of the time, right? Like
Yeah.
hockey is
Yeah.
hockey and football were basically all I was watching for a time.
Yeah, and the thing is, recreation is good. I mean, of course, you need to have it in moderation, and that's hard to do if you have ADHD because you're gonna want to you're gonna
To
fixate
be
on
fair, it also
things,
depends on your state
and
in life
sometimes it's
too, right? It depends on what
yeah, it
season
also
you're in. Like if you're in my situation where you're currently not working, you're just looking for work, there's only so much you can do. So obviously entertainment's going to take up a lot more
yeah,
of your time than it would if you were working or had a
yeah,
family, which I have neither of those
yeah. I
things.
mean, it should just whatever your recreation is, it should be like reasonable for your state of
Yeah.
life. You know where you're at, like whatever you're doing. And like thing is you just don't want like you absolutely cannot let these things matter more to you than
Hmm.
God. God ultimately has to be your number one. And if that is the case, God is your number one, as in like he just matters more to you than that stuff, that that stuff isn't like your whole life, then you're not committing idolatry.
Hmm.
You know, you're fine. Maybe you're being a little gluttonous with what you're doing, and that's another thing that you just have to deal with ADHD because of the hyperfixations that happen. But I mean that's a whole other battle in of itself.
Right, exactly. Right. It has to be a, you have to, in a sense, you have to be able to decide like, okay, no more, right? Like you have
Yeah,
to be able to drop it in a moment's notice. But like, it's, that doesn't mean like, how do I say this? Just because you are capable of it doesn't mean that has to happen. But I don't mean that as in like, let's say like you're in prayer and then like God speaks to you like very clearly, like it is 100% God, and he says, hey, stop, I want you to just give this up, right? If that happens and you say, oh man, like I don't know, I really like that, like that's obviously a problem. But like, you know, that doesn't mean that like you should give these things up just because you can give it up, right? Maybe that's not the
yeah,
best way to say it. It's a very hard like line, not a line. It's a very like surprisingly complicated thing to like express, because on the one hand, like you have to be detached enough to say, if this needs to be given up, fine, here you go, right? But on the other hand, that doesn't mean that you
yeah,
can't enjoy it, right? That doesn't mean you can't
yeah. No,
like this or like have this or that thing. It's really just a matter of like, when the time comes to decide between the most important thing and this trivial thing, what do you pick, right? And
yeah,
by that point you should be able to go, oh well, obviously I'm going to go for God. Why would I pick anime over God, right?
yeah,
But
and
it but
that's a hard battle, and it takes a
it
lot
is.
of like I'm not gonna sit here and lie and say that I'm doing a good job at that. I'm not. I'm
No,
doing a
I'm a
trash job at
terrible.
that.
I'm not. None of us are. None of us are. Disclaimer: none of us are good examples. We just know what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. No,
We
like,
just know what we're
yeah.
supposed to be doing, but we do what we. What is the? How does it go in Saint Paul? His letter. I do what I know I should not, or something like that. It's an
Yeah.
ongoing battle. The point is we're not saints here.
No, yeah, we're not, and that's okay. It's to an extent, like, that's okay. It's like, as long as you're working and you're making, like, a good thing to do is to try to make, like, small steps towards trying to,
Well,
um,
and
be where you think you need to be, and just pray and do things of that sort.
Well, and one of the easiest ways to like facilitate that detachment is just like deciding, okay, I'm not gonna watch this or consume this or this whole thing for like a week or a month or whatever. Like just little fasts, right? That's
Yeah.
part of what
Or like
fasting is.
or
That's
like,
what.
"I'm gonna do this for an hour and no more,"
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Like,
Like
limiting
doing the whole
yourself.
Carlo Acutis thing where he like would not only play video games for like an hour a week, and I'm like, dude, that guy's legendary. I could not.
No, that is legendary, I couldn't, dude.
That is
I play
next
games for more
level.
than an hour a week. No, dude, like,
Definitely.
yeah, that'd be me too, like, stay off Discord for, I don't
Well,
know,
but
more
like
than
those
20
kinds of things.
minutes.
Right. Impossible challenge.
Yeah, right.
But like those kinds of things are like that's what I mean, right? Like being able to like do something like that. It doesn't have to be like, you know, anime only 1 hour a week on Sundays or something like that. Like it doesn't have to be that. It could just be as simple as like, hey, at this time of day is quiet time. I'm not going to do that. Or even just like every day I allow myself, one episode or this much, like whatever it has to be. It's all dependent on where you're at and with good prudence, which means if you're a scrupulant, you're not allowed to make this decision on your own.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like you just have to be able to as long as you can do that, right? Like, and if you can't, that's why you start, right? Start with simple stuff like, okay, today I'm not gonna watch anime, or today I'm not going to eat sugar, or whatever it is, whatever it is that you kind of struggle with your life, with your spiritual life, and like just day to day life, so to speak. That's kind of a weird setup of difference here, but like that sort of thing, whatever it is you're struggling with, just see how you can like kind of start creating a spirit of detachment around it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's a wonderful thing to do. And another thing, if you're like us and you have ADHD and OCD, um, and you're dealing with this, don't like, if you fail and you end up watching anime on the day that you said you're not gonna watch anime, like, that's not automatically in what you don't need to go to
It's
confession.
not it's not
Probably
something
not.
it is not something that I do not think it's something you'd have to go to confession over. Well, you could bring it up in your next confession. In my case, like let's say I'll give you one, right? I have an Advent penance where I'm not using you to Instagram this Advent, right? And then today I went on Instagram actually, right? This is something where I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna try again, right? I'll
Yeah.
bring it up in my next confession, but I'm not losing sleep over it because it's not. First of all, you don't. I don't know how it is over there in the States, but at least where I'm at, you don't. It's not binding the same way like a Lenten penance is, right? It's not a
No.
Lent thing where like you have to give something up. It's an act of piety. You choose to do it, right?
Yeah.
And so that
Yeah,
means
like, acts of
if you fail, you just try again. Start again.
yeah, and
God is
this
a
was, like,
God of new
Jesus.
beginnings.
Yeah,
God is
this
a
was
God of new
Jesus's whole
beginnings, and that
thing.
means like his whole thing. I just want to say this really quick before
Yeah.
you continue. God is a God of new beginnings, and he delights in nothing more than us deciding to just begin again. Right? That's
Yeah.
what confession is. That's what all of this is let's start again.
Yeah.
Right? And you were saying.
Yeah, like, and this was Jesus's whole thing with, like, the Pharisees. Jesus didn't think that the Pharisees were intrinsically bad. I think Jesus actually leaned more on the Pharisee side. Like, I mean, he even said that is if you're not more pious than the Pharisee, you won't go to heaven.
Hmm.
But, like, or something to that, like, something like that. But, um, Jesus, his thing with the Pharisees was that they had these pious things that were good in of themselves, because it helped them to follow the law and to make sure that they were following the law piously. They were doing good stuff. But the problem is that they lifted up those acts of piety to divine law. So if you didn't do this, then you were sinning or you were going against the commandments. And so,
Right.
like, don't do that with like your acts of piety, especially if you're OCD. Like, don't let yourself think that you're committing a mortal sin because you failed to do this act of piety which you've taken upon yourself. You know,
Well, and
just,
if you're and
just
if you and it might even be like if you're at a point where like that's how you're thinking about it, you should avoid them until you can get to a point where you can actually do them without this like
yeah,
massive anchor on your neck.
yeah, and like I have that. Like I actually don't. Um, I won't confess past sins that I forgot from another confession,
Hmm.
because I know that if I did, then I would get scrupulous about it, and then would feel like I need to confess sins that I forgot from another confession. That's absolutely not the case.
Well, and you know what? I think I do something similar now because my priest essentially gave me a very specific thing to say after I say my sins. It's like, you know, how you'd normally say, for these and all my sins, please forgive me, Father, right? My priest told me, say, for these and all my sins that I can't remember, please forgive me. And that's it. That counts it,
Yeah.
right? Like,
No.
that's it.
Yeah. No. And I
You
do that
say
too.
that, and that counts for all the stuff you can't remember, which means if you remember it after confession, well, I said that,
And even
and
if
it's done.
you did forget something, and like you didn't say that formula, and you just confessed, but there's something you left out because you forgot it,
Mhm.
God's not going to trip about that. Like, you're chilling,
No.
you know, you because you just didn't remember. Like, it doesn't
Mhm.
matter, because confession isn't about like, oh, I need to say each of these specific things in this specific way, and I
Mhm.
have to meet all these criteria. No, confession is about God's mercy. So just
Mhm.
focus on God's mercy, not on the details. And
Mhm.
that, because I had that problem where like I would write down my sins like obsessively. Like,
Mhm.
I would have like giant memos of like all these things, and it would perpetrate my OCD, perpetrate my scrupulosity, and then I would have to read out this list and confession. But then I stopped doing that because it was like I wasn't focusing on God's mercy. I was
Right.
focusing on my sin. And the
Well,
point of
exactly, right? Yes.
reconciliation, sin is boring. The point of reconciliation is not the sin. The point is God's mercy. You know?
Well, yeah, it forces at the end of the day, scrupulosity has you focusing on the wrong thing, right? Which is
Yeah.
your sinfulness. And to be fair, you and me are both wretches, and anyone listening to this is an absolute wretch, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. However, in like that's not as important in light of the love and the mercy that God has for us, right? It outweighs it by an order of magnitude that you and I will never understand on this side of heaven, and we might not even understand on that side of heaven.
Yeah.
Right? It's so much so that like the real pain, the worst part of scrupulosity really is you focus on the wrong thing, right? You focus on yourself, you focus on what you've done, but you don't think about God, right? And how that changes in light of who God is and what he is, right?
Mhm.
It's rough, but at the same time I can't like it's funny. That doesn't help people when you say that though. What I just said. It doesn't it's a fact. But that's not going to snap someone out of their scrupulosity. You tell them you're focusing on, you're focusing on yourself, not God. Congratulations, you've just given them a new scruple,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's such a very delicate place that like really that's why like honestly like your main the way you get out of this, I think even Saint Alphonsus says this, is like get a spiritual director and just submit to him. Whatever he
Yeah.
says,
And
you
it's
do
like,
it.
and coming to that like full appreciation of the fact that it's about God's mercy, not your sin, is like, that's going to take time. That's going to take time
Yeah,
and prayer and
absolutely.
reflection. You know, like just keep that in the back of your mind. Don't be scrupulous about it, but don't think you're sinning because you're thinking about your sins. Like, no, that's ridiculous.
Well, and frankly, just
Um
frankly, like, don't even. You shouldn't think about your sins that much, any more than like. How do I say this? This may be a part you need to like edit out or something because I have no idea how to say this properly. You shouldn't think about them any more than is necessary. And obviously that's like a very loaded statement for a scrupulant because that basically translates to, oh, okay, I'm going to be thinking about it for the rest of my life now, right?
Yeah.
But you really, you shouldn't be thinking about it any more than, you know, I'll give it like this, right? Like after I walk out of a confessional, I actually don't remember. I don't even remember what I confessed last week, right? Like I forgot.
Yeah.
I forgot what I confessed on. Like I made Friday was like this week. Friday was like my confession day, just because they were doing an adoration event, right? So I was like, oh, I'll go then instead of Sunday, whatever, right?
Mhm.
But like I forgot what I confessed that day, right? Because it's not like, why would I think about it? God forgave it. He forgets it. Why should I remember it, right?
Yeah, and I mean, like, I think it's okay to think about your sins if you're doing some like
Well, if you're an
prayer,
habitual,
if you're if you're in some act of piety to reflect on your sin and God's mercy, that's fine. But if you're
Mm,
just like obsessing over your sins, like I think that you should obsess over God's mercy. Like
mm,
think about that instead. You know,
mm,
like if you find yourself like dwelling on that too much, maybe try to think about like God's mercy and like how much he loves you and how much he wants you to follow in his way, to be in a state of grace and just submit yourself to him and give yourself to him and embrace that mercy, and you'll find that it'll help you to find some peace maybe.
right. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if there's much more to say on this topic. I appreciate you coming
There's
on to
probably
discuss
smarter
this.
people in this world who could give you far more than I can, but I'm glad
Oh,
that
I'm
you
sure
were
there are people
willing
that can
to.
do more than me.
Well, I guess you and I have to make do with each other for now.
Yeah. Well, I
But
think that it's helpful for people to hear somebody else that has their same struggles and to
mhm,
see like sort of how they're dealing with it, so to help inform them. So I hope that this somebody finds this and it helps them.
I just hope that they don't get like too. I hope that we were coherent enough for people.
Hopefully. Yeah, hopefully.
Hopefully,
But thank you so
maybe we'll,
much.
for sure.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on and talking about this. I really appreciate it. And I hope that everyone watching, uh, I hope that you talk to your spiritual director, talk to your therapist,
And if you don't have
do
one,
what you
get
got
one.
to do. Yeah, get one, pray, try to figure out what works for you, and rely on God's mercy because he'll always be there for you.
Absolutely.
Okay, I think that's good.
Yay!